And welcome back to another episode of the Chips Podcast, Mother's Day edition. We're recording this on Mother's Day, so I guess when you're watching this, happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Ryan Amick, Tyler Melito here. Once again, Ryan dressed up for this occasion. I'm sorry I couldn't do the same.
I'm in my Mother's Day attire still, but it's always good to look for the part,
Yeah,
Always good to look good. Look good for the camera, because we are technically on camera. At school, we were just behind the camera on the microphones, but now we have the Zoom element. Our faces are on. You can't be looking like a scrub. Not that you are, of course.
I do.
You got the typical gray. Well, you have the gray t-shirt or long sleeve tee and a backwards hat, so your usual Tyler Melito attire.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten a haircut still.
Neither. Oh, yeah, me neither. Yeah. I don't think anyone's really. It's hard to. I mean, you could do your DIY haircuts where I've seen a lot go wrong. I mean, my cousin I saw today, his went kind of wrong.
My parents have been saying, "Hey, Tyler, we got a razor in the bathroom. Just cut it all off right now." I'm like, nope, not going to happen. Kind of want to see this play out. But enough about haircuts and quarantine and all that. Because, Ryan, we had some news drop this past week, specifically on Thursday night. The NFL schedule for the 2020 regular season is supposed to start, I think it's September 10th? I have the schedule right here. Yeah, September 10th with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Houston Texans in Kansas City, which should be a great game. And Super Bowl 55 in February. Obviously, all those things could change because of this pandemic. Who knows when things will start back up. But let's talk about the schedule. Who has the toughest schedule, in our opinion, the easiest schedule? Who maybe are very, very early playoff predictions here in May? And then what games are we most excited for? You want to do that?
Yeah, I'm bored. Let's go.
All right. I'm bored. Me too. We do got the Jordan Ducks. Did you record it, by the way, this time?
Yeah, because we might run over it this time. So, yeah, I had to make sure
there you
I recorded it.
Finally, Ryan's thinking with his head. Let's start with the toughest schedule. So the way I did it personally, I did it AFC, one AFC team and one NFC team. And for me, the AFC team who I think has the toughest schedule, I mean, obviously the Patriots jump off the board because they don't have Tom Brady and they play a first-place schedule in the AFC. They play the Chiefs, the Ravens, etc. But I went with the New York Jets simply because they played their division twice. They'll probably lose 4 to 5 of those games in their division. I don't think they beat the Bills at all. They probably lose to the Patriots once, if not twice, and to the Dolphins once, if not twice. So that's 4 to 5 losses there. Then they play the Seahawks, Browns, Colts, Cardinals, Broncos, and Chargers, all of whom have playoff aspirations. Not to mention, Sam Darnold is going to be under a lot of pressure, being this is his third year in the league. Adam Gase is pretty much on the hot seat, given his not-so-great start as a head coach for the Jets. And Le'Veon Bell, that relationship is a little bit weary. They signed Frank Gore, so you can tell there's not a whole lot of faith in Le'Veon Bell, I guess you can say. And that defense has a lot of holes. So as my face is bleeding for some reason, I guess I cut myself shaving the other day, and I just opened the scab. But, yeah, the Jets, I think, have the toughest schedule in the entire AFC.
Yeah, I agree. I had them on my list as well. I had a couple teams on my list. I'll let you get to your NFC team as well. But first, looking at the Jets, because they were on my list, they undeniably have arguably one of the hardest schedules when you look at it on paper. I think in terms of strength of schedule, it's top 3 or something. In terms of defense and pass rush, they have, I think, the hardest schedule in terms of the NFL. I mean, you just look at like the teams you mentioned, all these teams are have elite pass rushers. The Bills, who they start with, the Niners, Colts, Broncos, Chargers, Bills, all in a row. That's as tough as it gets. And then the one team that doesn't have that great a pass rush, Chiefs on the road. So, I mean, they don't have a single break in sight. And then the two games they could have a bit of an advantage at, or maybe the Dolphins, you could argue, they're both kind of in rebuilding mode. They're same division. So either those are toss-ups, but they have them back to back. They don't space it out for them to maybe, where there's a tough stretch, you slide a Dolphins game in there to maybe get the team going. They have it before the bye and after the bye. So one of their easiest teams is kind of just packed into one area. So where the rest of the schedule is so much harder than any other team that we will even mention, even with the rest of our teams that we think has tough schedules. I agree. The Jets have a rough one.
Yeah, and not to mention that Dolphins game, how you mentioned is Dolphins by Dolphins for the Jets. The Dolphins will be coming off a bye as well. So it's not like you have that advantage of, we just coming off a bye and we'll play our division foe. And the Dolphins have played 3 straight. They will have that bye as well. So that kind of works against the Jets. So you could arguably make the case if they lose that first game, then they go into the bye, they're kind of upset, and then they go into that second one. I don't know if that second one is on the road. I'll look at it right now if my computer doesn't glitch. Here, let's pull it up. Miami Dolphins schedule. And while that loads, who is your AFC team that has the toughest schedule in your opinion?
I stayed in the same division, partly because the division they have to face is so tough. They're versing the NFC West, which is, I think, by far the toughest division in football. So that alone is going to be tough for every team in that division. But when you look at the Patriots, obviously what they lost this offseason, an easier schedule would have been nicer for them. We already knew they were going to face the NFC West before the schedule came out. But in terms of just where each team is played, it's rough for them. So first to mention, they have a bye week 6, which is very early. You don't like to have a bye that early into the season. You just started to get things going. Bye is more useful when it's later in the season. But after that bye, or let's go before that bye first. You have week 2 Seahawks, week 4 at Chiefs, and week 5 Broncos. Then after the bye, you have the Niners at Bills, Ravens, and then look down the schedule, Cardinals, Chargers, and Rams. They have 3 away games in a row, Chargers, Rams, and Dolphins. You know, that Dolphin game is not an easy winnable like it was in past years for the Patriots. And when you look at the schedule as a whole, this is really tough for the Pats.
Yeah, like I said, I thought about going with the Patriots. Circling back to the Jets, by the way, they play at Miami, then the bye, then in New York. So it works a little bit favorably there. But shifting back to New England, the one reason why I didn't give them my toughest schedule in the AFC, strictly because they still have an all-time great coach, arguably the greatest coach in Bill Belichick, and they have a still really solid defense. They lost a couple pieces on that defense with, I believe they lost Kyle Van Noy and Jamie Collins as well, but they're still really solid in that front. Whereas the Jets, they don't have really much of anything. And they lost their best wide receiver and didn't pick one up in the draft, at least one of the top ones. Shifting gears to the NFC, toughest schedule for me, I think it's a no-brainer. It's the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, they have a first-year head coach in Matt Rule, so there's an adjustment, and you don't have an offseason. They lost a lot of pieces on defense, including James Bradbury and Luke Kuechly. First-year starter, like a starter going into the season in Teddy Bridgewater. He hasn't been named the starter heading into a season since 2015 with the Vikings when he suffered that horrible knee injury. And not to mention, for their 6 division games, they have to go against Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, Todd Gurley, Matt Ryan, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just on offense. The Panthers' D sucks on offense, and the defenses in that division aren't that bad either. Not to mention they will also face the Packers, Vikings, Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos, who I think will all be much improved this year. Some close to what they were last year, because obviously like the Chiefs were really good last year. So I think overall the Panthers, if they finish better than bottom 3 in the NFC, I will be shocked. I think if you're going to Vegas, bet that the Panthers will be third worst, second worst, or worst in the entire NFC, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, I view the Panthers as a team. They had a good draft, in my opinion.
They did have a good draft.
Head coach with a new quarterback, with a ton of people leaving in the offseason.
Entirely defensive draft.
Yeah, entirely defensive draft. I think down the road they'll be a stronger team, but this is more of a rebuilding. It's not more of a rebuild. It's like a reset. Or I've heard people call it like a rehab type of year. Like we had lost so many pieces. This is a totally new team from start to bottom, from the coaching staff to the players. I think this team needs a couple years before they find their identity, find their system that works. And because I think they have some of the talent already in place, but like you said, they have legends in their division with Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, just to mention the QBs, and you mentioned all the weapons already. So I think it'll be tough for the Panthers, but I'm keeping it in New York. I think that New York got a bad rap with scheduling. I don't like the Giants' schedule at all.
I agree.
I mean, again, looking at the division they have to face, their division isn't the strongest we saw last year, but I think the Eagles and Cowboys both made improvements and are both playoff caliber teams that they have to face twice a year. They usually don't fare well against either team, so those could be 4 losses right away. And then you look at the Redskins even. Chase Young, I think, is going to be a problem for the Giants to deal with. I don't know if they win both Redskin games like they did last year. But then you look at their AFC opponent, it's the North. You're talking about Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and the Browns. A Steelers team week 1 at home in prime time on Monday night, which they're not usually used to. They're usually used to losing to the Cowboys week 1, but now they have a Steelers team that they have Ben back, which is one of their biggest missing pieces. They have a strong defense, great edge rushers for this young offensive line. And like you mentioned, with the Panthers having a new head coach, new quarterback, the Giants have a second-year quarterback in Daniel Jones, whole new coaching staff, head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. And I think it's going to be rough from the start. You look, they have the Niners week 3, Rams are no gimme, and the Cowboys right after that on the road. Then Buccaneers a primetime game, which is another tough one. Then the Seahawks, Browns, and Ravens towards the end of the schedule before a final game with the Cowboys. I don't view any of those as favorable matchups for the Giants. And going before the schedule was released, it could be argued that they had one of the tougher opponents schedule in terms of just the opponent list that they have to face.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the schedule did them any different, or it did them any better.
Yeah, I agree with that point. The Giants were a consideration for me. I just figure in terms of their division, I think they could definitely win at least 3 games in their division, if not 4.
Really?
Yeah, I honestly think they could sweep one of the teams in their division. I don't see the Panthers winning a single game in their own division. If not, it's going to be it would be a fluky game.
That Falcons team. Their defense is weak. Very weak. I know they have Todd Gurley. I know they have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Matt Ryan. They have a good offense, but that defense is very weak. And then the Panthers have a pretty solid offense. I mean, they have one of the biggest playmakers in the league in Christian McCaffrey. They have nice pieces on the outside. They just got Robbie Anderson in free agency.
Yeah.
Moore was coming into his own last year, going to get a year better. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is better than any quarterback play they had last year. So I think the Falcons and Panthers are more on an equal level, kind of similar to how the Giants and Redskins are kind of on a similar level. I don't think either 4 of those teams are playoff teams, but I just feel that the Giants, I feel like they struggle more against their division opponents. They haven't beaten the Eagles, I don't think, in 4 years. I think they've lost the last 8 matchups against the Eagles. They barely beat the Cowboys, and the Cowboys got better. So I agree. The Panthers don't have an easy schedule. The Giants don't have an easy schedule. Both have rookie head coaches. I don't see many wins coming to either squad.
The one perk for the Panthers, although I kind of use it as a knock against them, they do have a somewhat veteran quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. Simply the Giants don't have in Daniel Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see it working out well. Shifting gears to the other side, though. Easiest schedule. Obviously, there are some teams who got lucky in terms of their scheduling. Who do you have for your AFC team who has the easiest schedule?
I mean, the team who statistically has the easiest schedule in terms of strength of schedule, the Ravens.
Yeah.
They didn't need an easy schedule, but boy, did they get one. As we mentioned, the AFC North is versus the NFC East, and the NFC East has teams like the Giants and the Redskins who the Ravens will just destroy no matter where you put them in their lineup. I think they have a kind of tough start out of the gate. They have the Browns at home. That's going to be a close game between 2 teams who I think will be playoff teams and will be
Browns beat them
obviously
once
division round. They beat them. That was one of the only teams to beat Lamar Jackson last year. Then they have Chiefs week 3. That's a big one. We'll definitely get into that later.
Yeah.
But aside from that, after that Chiefs game, they have the Redskins, the Bengals, an Eagles team that will be a closer one. The Steelers. Then you look past their bye, which is week 8, which is towards the middle of the season, which is where you would like to have a bye around that area. Looking towards the end of the schedule, they have Jaguars, Giants, Bengals to close it out, the last 3 games of the season. And then just looking at that, I think the Ravens, in terms of statistics, they have the easy schedule, but look at their placement. Last 3 games, easy winnable. Mm-hmm. Some of their beginning games, easy winnable. So they should have a great start and should have a good finish.
And that bodes well for them in the playoffs, especially if they are game back tied entering those final few weeks for the number 1 seed or a first-round bye. Having those easy games at the end really works well. I also had the Ravens, like you mentioned, they play their division, which they can easily win 4 to 5 games, I think, confidently. I think they can definitely sweep the Bengals, take 1 or 2 from the Browns, and take 1 or 2 from the Steelers, barring an injury. Obviously, if Lamar Jackson gets hurt, it's a wash. I don't think they do that well. But saying no one gets hurt, they added some pieces on defense, specifically Calais Campbell, that one hole they had on the defensive line, not to mention John Harbaugh, top 5 coach in football, in my opinion. And then you mentioned it. They play the Jaguars. They play the Colts. They play the Redskins. They play the Giants. Should all be cakewalks. And then they get lucky. They play the Chiefs at home this year. They lost to them on the road last year. And they play the Cowboys at home. They should win at least one of those games in theory. So I think this team could easily be a 12-plus wins team and make a deep run in the playoffs. Another year for Lamar Jackson as the full-time starter.
Another thing I wanted to add about that Cowboys game, you would think it's a Thursday night game, so you would think it'd be on a shorter schedule. You have less time to prepare for that game. But both teams play on Thanksgiving the week before, so they have a full week to play
Ravens play on Thanksgiving this year?
game. Yeah, they play the Steelers the night game, which we'll get into later too once we get to week 12.
I didn't know that.
But yeah, that's going to be a good game for sure. And so Cowboys, I would agree, is one of the tougher teams they play on their schedule, but they do get that week that they wouldn't get if they didn't play the following Thursday. So in terms of scheduling, it really just worked out very well for the Ravens, who had the best record in the NFL last year. So who really thinks they needed it, but they got it, and they should take advantage of it. And in my opinion, we'll get to the division, the conference rankings in a second, but I think they'll definitely be at the top.
Yeah. For the NFC, I kind of have an interesting pick. So I want to hear yours first for the easiest schedule, and maybe we'll see. Maybe we agree. There's a 1 in 16 chance. Well, actually 1 in 14 because we
canceled 2 out already. It's terrible scheduling. I'm going with the Niners, another team that does not need the help that like the Ravens did, but I think they got it in terms of their schedule. You look at the division that they are playing, they're versing the AFC East, where the Patriots just lost Tom Brady. Dolphins, they did get a big haul in the draft. They're a very young team. They did get 2 and everything, but who knows who's going to be playing quarterback around that week 1 start. And they don't play him until week 5. Who knows if Tua is going to be playing at that point. Then the Jets, who had a really tough schedule, we don't think they're going to be very good this year. And pretty much just the Bills, it's the only real opponent they have in that conference. But just looking at the schedule, their start of the year, I don't see a single opponent that they won't destroy by like 10 points until week 8. You have the Cardinals, who they 2-0'd last year in the division. The Jets and Giants, who we just mentioned, terrible schedules, won't be great teams. The Eagles, that will be an interesting one. I don't think they'll destroy them, but that's their second home game, and that's going to be the first real test they have on the season. But then, as I mentioned, the Dolphins, then they have the Rams, Patriots, as obviously don't have Tom Brady, and then it's week 8 against the Seahawks. That's when things start to get a little more interesting. But until then, I think those are all cupcake games almost. They should easily win those. And then they have a bye at week 11, which is a pretty good time to have a bye. And then right out the bye, they have the Rams, who I think they could beat, and the Redskins, Cardinals, again, teams they could easily beat. So I think this schedule is in favor of the Niners, and I think, like the Ravens, they'll just build upon their great season they had last year.
Yeah, I like that thing. I had the Niners on my list, but I think having a first-place schedule, and they're going to regress naturally. The running game's not going to be as successful this year as it was last year. The defense won't. They lost to Forrest Buckner. Sure, they added some nice pieces in the draft. But my pick, and you're going to be shocked by this, I think, I went with the Dallas Cowboys. I think they got better on offense. They added CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott. They need to sign him, obviously. Zeke Elliott's coming back, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. They brought in Mike McCarthy as a head coach, who I think is going to be really good for that team. Their defense is now pretty solid. And similar with their division and with the Ravens for their division, I think the Cowboys can win 4 to 5 games. They could sweep the Redskins, sweep the Giants, probably take 1 or 2 from the Eagles, something like that. Maybe they'll lose a fluky game to the Giants because, you know what, that's what the Cowboys always do. Neither here nor there, though. And then they also play the Browns, Bengals, Rams, Cardinals, and Steelers. On paper, those teams are probably worse than the Cowboys. I guess you can agree with me on that one. So overall, the Cowboys have it set up nicely for them. The one thing is, will they be the Cowboys in themselves and just mess everything up? Because that's the thing. It always seems like the Cowboys, they have a good schedule. They can easily win 10, 11 games, and then they do something to themselves, whether it be Jerry Jones, the quarterback play, the head coach, the defense, whatever it is, and they end up going 8-8, 9-7, second in their division. That's the thing, too, for the Cowboys. The Eagles won that division last year, so they play the first-place schedule. They play the Niners. They play whoever was the Packers. They play the Saints. The Cowboys don't play those teams. They play all the second-place teams in the NFC. So the Vikings, the Seahawks, and whoever the second-place team was in the NFC South. Was it the Falcons? I don't remember. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's the Bucks, I think.
it was the
Or
Bucks
it
or the
might have been the
Falcons. I
Falcons.
think it was
Bucks
the
or the
Falcons. The
Falcons.
Bucks were third because of the draft picks.
Yeah, because the Giants faced the Bucks, so the Cowboys
Right.
faced the Falcons.
Yeah. So I think that works in the Cowboys' favor slightly. So I think they have the easiest schedule on the NFC side.
All right, and no, I don't disagree with that at all. I think they definitely do have an easier schedule, especially when you look at the top.
Mm-hmm.
That Rams game, even though it is in LA in the new stadium, I think they're
Week
in
1
terms of
too,
matchup wise. I'll get into that once we get into the week by week schedule. I actually have a kind of interesting take on that game. Then they have the Falcons, who we just mentioned, week 2. I think that's a win. And then the Giants, not too far after that. Redskins, of course, they both first Giants and Redskins twice a year. So I think in terms of schedule, yeah, the Cowboys are on the easier side. It just will be interesting to see how new head coach, disgruntled quarterback who wants to get paid, and Dak Prescott, see how they mesh going into this year.
So I will say for the Cowboys, though, they signed Andy Dalton if Dak Prescott decides for whatever reason not to play. He's not a terrible backup. And when you think about it in the grand scheme of backups in the NFL, Andy Dalton, I wouldn't say is worse than 10, maybe not even worse than 7. You go team by team. So I think the Cowboys are set up nicely in that spot as well. Before we go to week by week, what games are we most excited for, let's talk the playoffs. Who do you think in the AFC are the now 7 teams, because they added a third wildcard team this year, who make the playoffs?
All right, so in terms of division winners, I think the Chiefs, Ravens, Colts, and Bills should be the obvious teams for each division. Don't have to explain it for the Chiefs and Ravens. They have the arguably 2 best players in the league. The Colts, that division did get weaker. The Texans, I don't think, will be a threat, even though they do have Deshaun Watson, who's arguably top 5, top 3 quarterback. They don't have anything really to surround him. Their defense got weaker. I don't really believe in the Texans. And I'll get to the Titans in a second. I think it was a little fluky what they did last year. So I think the Colts made vast improvements in the offseason and did very well for a team who lost a generational quarterback in Andrew Luck right before the season started, and kind of just tried to keep things together, and because it easily could have fallen apart. If this was a dysfunctional franchise, this team would have won like 2 games last year, because they just, before the season started, they lost Andrew Luck and were kind of hopeless. Had Kobe Brissett, who played decent, but they kind of managed a decent season last year with what they had. And I think they made improvements, especially with Phillip Rivers, who they signed in the offseason. So I think they should win that division. And then the Bills, obviously Tom Brady leaving, Jets, Dolphins rebuilding. It's the Bills' time. Easy winners of that division. Then we look into the 3 now wild card spots, because they added another. I think the Broncos, with what they did this offseason, should be in the playoff hunt, should make a wild card round. The Browns, with the talent they have, new GM and head coach, so they'll get some time to get used to all that. But I think just on sheer talent, there's no excuse for the Browns not making the playoffs. If they miss the playoffs, they're going to look at Baker, and then look at even the new head coach. Because if this coach can't bring all this talent, it might be, there's a lot of mouths to feed on offense, so it could be a little challenging to get everyone to mesh together. But just on sheer talent alone, this is a playoff team. I don't think they expect anything less than the playoffs, especially with all the hype they had last year. I understand they didn't do as well because Freddie just wasn't suitable for the job. But now you have new head coach, Baker Mayfield, even growing even more in his career, should bounce back from a bad season, and they should be a playoff team. Then you get to that 7th spot. And I'm not too sure about this, because we are pretty early in the offseason. We still have, if they do have training camp and all that, preseason injuries, all that stuff can affect anything. But if we're looking at it right now, there's 3 teams I think have a shot for that 7th spot: the Titans, the Steelers, and my pick, the Chargers.
Okay.
And the reason I flip-flopped when I was doing this before we got on air, I flip-flopped between every single team. I had the Steelers in there at one point, I had the Titans in there at one point, and now I have the Chargers. And I feel stronger with the Chargers because of what they did in this offseason is more than the other 2 teams. I think the Titans, I don't know if they're going to get the same production from Ryan Tannehill. They barely made the playoffs last year. They just happened to go very far in the playoffs because they had a Pats team that was on the decline. Their franchise was falling apart before our very eyes, as we saw in Week 17 loss to the Dolphins. They were vulnerable, not used to playing on a wild card weekend with Tom Brady, who's not the same player he is. And I think that's why the Titans were able to take advantage of that. And then when you look at the Ravens, sure, that was an upset, but the Titans were one of the better run-stopping teams in the league, and the Ravens were not. And that dynamic is why Derrick Henry ran all over them, and the Ravens were kind of stagnant for the first 2-3 quarters of that game and ended up losing. So I think it favored them in terms of the postseason, which is why they did so well. And I'm pretty high on this Titans team. I think they could easily still make the playoffs. They're in a weak division, but they did lose Logan Ryan, which is a big piece on that defense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much Ryan Tannehill's production is going to hold up. I do believe in Mike Vrabel, but I think right now I'm not calling this team a playoff team just yet. I want to see if it was a fluke last year or if they can reproduce that same what they did in the postseason, if they could reproduce that play during the regular season. Then you look at the Steelers. Defense is one of the top in the league. But the big question for me is quarterback play. Yeah. I know they have Ben Roethlisberger coming back, but he's 38 now. We see Eli Manning, same draft class, just retired. Phillip Rivers just threw, I think, the most interceptions in his career last year and now has to go to a different team for a change of scenery. He's coming off an injury where we haven't seen him play without the likes of Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell yet. Because last year was when Bell and Brown left Pittsburgh, and he only played a couple days before he got injured. And
they played a game and a half.
Games. And they lost both those games as well. So I'm not so sure what we're going to get out of Ben Roethlisberger. He's kind of been out of shape. He's not one to put in that much work during the offseason. And even with this stout defense, they're in a tough division with the Ravens and the Browns, and I'm not too confident with the Steelers. I still think they could be a playoff team in the race for that 7th spot, but I think the Chargers are the ones ahead of those two teams I just mentioned because of what they made, the moves they made on the defensive end in the offseason. The quarterback was one of the biggest question marks on that team. Phillip Rivers did not play well for them. Turned the ball over too many times. They saw with the Bucs that prevented them from winning games because of all those turnovers. Even the Browns, all those turnovers from Baker Mayfield prevented them from winning closer games. Same with the Chargers. They lost closer games because of that. They lost a big piece in Derwin James due to injury last year. They're getting him back, which is huge for that defense. Not to mention Chris Harris they got in the offseason. That secondary is undoubtedly
loaded.
The best. Them and the Ravens have the best secondaries in the league. Mm-hmm. And that's huge in this day and age where passing is everything. I think Austin Eckler is going to break out this year. It is going to be huge for whoever quarterback starts for that Chargers team week 1. Whether it's Tyrod Taylor, who I think could be fine and lead his team to a playoffs on his own, let Justin Herbert sit. I think that would be kind of the smarter move. Unless Tyrod's struggling, then bring Herbert and see what he's got. But if Tyrod does enough to bring this team to win close games and tough matches, I think I like the Chargers in this 7th spot. They're moving to a new stadium. Hopefully now they'll finally have fans because they had –
right.
It looked like the coronavirus came early to the Chargers in their last stadium because they had no fans in sight. Every year they're in that soccer stadium pretty much. Now they have a new legit stadium. They're rebranded, got new uniforms, have this new aura, have a new quarterback who they might not play right away, but it's a new Chargers team. They moved on from Phillip Rivers. I think they're ready to go in a tough division with the Broncos and the Chiefs. But I still believe the Chargers have a slight edge over the Steelers and Titans. But once we get closer to the season, that could vary. And I know I rambled for a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that last spot could go up to anybody. And I still believe the 6 teams I mentioned ahead will undoubtedly make the playoffs.
Yeah.
The AFC.
Yeah, I am in a similar boat as you. I have a lot of the same picks. For my division winners in the AFC, it's got to be in no particular order. And obviously injuries could play a huge monkey wrench in this. If Patrick Mahomes gets hurt in week 1 and misses the entire season, KC ain't making the playoffs. Sorry, folks. It's just not going to happen. Whoever their backup is, I think it's Chad Henne. They signed Shea Patterson too. Neither of those guys are Patrick Mahomes, last I checked. So but for me, as of right now, I got the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, and my AFC South team, I'm actually going to go with the Tennessee Titans. I like what they did. I don't think they'll replicate the run they went on toward the end of the season once Tannehill took over. But I think it's only going to take 9 or so wins to win that division. The Jaguars are obviously not going to do it. The Texans, maybe, but who knows? And the Colts, that's the one wild card. It depends of who's a quarterback. If it's Brissett, probably not. Rivers.
You don't think Rivers is going to start?
No, I mean, if Rivers gets hurt or for some crazy reason.
Okay.
Rivers, I don't have as much faith in, though. I don't have him high on my list in terms of guys who I think can lead a team to the playoffs in 2020. For the wild card, I have the Browns. The dog pound finally gets back. Although I will say, though, if they miss the playoffs, I agree with you. Baker is done. He's done.
Everyone's going to look at Baker. With everything they did for that team, it's got to be Baker at that point.
It's got to be. I like the Broncos. I'm going to have them make it in there as well. Drew Lock has swagger out the building. That guy, and they went offense heavy in the draft. They got Jerry Jeudy. They got, who is it, KJ Hamler, if I'm not mistaken. They got Melvin Gordon in free agency. Cortland Sutton's still there. Noah Fant from last year. Philip Lindsay's still there. That offense can keep up with the Chiefs. So I love that team. And then for my 7th spot, I was debating with the Houston Texans. I think they could fight for that spot. The Steelers were another team, obviously quarterback play. I think if Big Ben gets hurt, though, Cam Newton will be signed to that team.
I want them to sign Cam right now.
Yeah.
I don't care if Big Ben's healthy all year.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't think they should sign him just if Big Ben gets injured. They need a backup quarterback better than what they had last year because it was a disaster in that position last year, which is why even with the defense they had, they didn't make the playoffs and they still struggled just because how weak the offense was as a whole. They did have injuries with Juju Smith. He was in and out of the lineup, and James Conner, which are two of their biggest weapons, and they were injured as well. So that offense was just kind of a mess as a whole. Yeah. But I think they should sign Cam because he can change that offense just like that. And I think his play is above whatever Big Ben's going to show up week 1 with.
I agree. But my 7th team, I'm not going with the Steelers. I'm not going with the Colts. I'm not going – the Chargers were in consideration. I think it all depends on the quarterback play. Tyrod Taylor, I think, could lead him to wins, but I don't think he can lead him to a playoff spot. And Justin Herbert, I think he needs a year. He's not going to come out of the water and be this big, great quarterback. My pick – also, side note, Dolphins make a run for the 7th spot. Wouldn't be surprised. But I'm going to go with the Houston Texans. I think they got enough there where they can fend off some of those other teams barring an injury. Deshaun Watson's still Deshaun Watson. He's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. Brandon Cooks, if he's healthy. Will Fuller, if he's healthy. David Johnson, if he's healthy. That offense could be very good. It all depends on health with the Texans. And if Bill O'Brien's not a moron and fake punts it when leading in your own inside your own 30 up against the Kansas City Chiefs. I might be alluding to something from last year we're talking about, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. But I think the Texans could definitely make it. The defense is still decent. They had a solid year. They had that remarkable comeback against the Buffalo Bills. J.J. Watt comes back, coming off the injury, the pectoral injury from last season. I think he'll play better. And I think that the Texans could do it. Once again, though, barring health. That's the one thing.
I actually like that pick of the Texans because even though Bill O'Brien did his best to ruin what they had last year, I still think they could be a playoff caliber team just based solely on Deshaun Watson. And also the pieces around him, even though they lost D-Hop, they're not that bad. They have 3 speedsters in Kenny Stills, Will Fuller, and Brandon Cooks. Even though all 3 have dealt with injuries in the past, if 2 of the 3 relatively stay healthy, I think that could be a dangerous combo just in terms of their speed and Deshaun's arm strength. And also they have the best running back that they've had since Arian Foster, I believe, in Houston, in David Johnson, who's also a threat as a pass catcher as well, which could play into that offense with Deshaun Watson as well. So I think I like that pick, honestly. I probably should have taken more consideration into the Texans. I just looked at, man, they just lost D-Hop for almost nothing. That's a bad look. And I don't know how Deshaun's going to take that. And they still have a bad offensive line. They
didn't have a Drake draft. But they do have Laramie Tunsil on that offensive line, the highest paid offensive lineman in football. So there's some pieces. The thing with the Texans is all going to be health. If they're healthy.
That and how much Deshaun could carry them.
Yeah, that's it.
2 big factors.
Those are indeed. Shifting to the NFC, though. The 7 teams, I think they're going to be very similar, at least for the division winners. For us, I'll do mine first. I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. Although I don't think they win 13 games, I do think they could win that division. Once again, they still got a really good defense. Jimmy G could be solid. Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, passing options. And the running game's not horrible. Let's be real here. NFC North, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. It's not so much that the Packers are leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else because, let's be real, they're not, especially at the wide receiver position. But I have no faith in the Lions. No faith in the Bears. And the Vikings, they go like this for me. They have one good year, one bad year. One good year, one bad year. This is probably going to be not a good year for them, although Kirk Cousins, I do have faith in him. I would love to see him do well because you like that a lot. NFC South, I'm going to go to New Orleans once again. Barring health, if Breeze gets hurt, I have no faith in Jameis Winston at all. But that's the team to beat in that division. And then the NFC East, I said the Cowboys had the easiest schedule, but I think they implode once again. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles winning back-to-back. It just makes the most sense in my opinion. I think they have a good defense. They got some help on offense with the wide receiver position. I think Miles Sanders is going to break out this year. Carson Wentz, if he's healthy, would be huge. He can get back to the MVP level he was prior to tearing his ACL. And Jalen Hurts will be a weapon for them. I don't think he'll play quarterback for them right away, maybe down the road. But he could be someone like a Taysom Hill in that offense who could be a gadget guy, come in for 10 to 13 snaps a game on offense and break the game wide open. And then my 3 wildcard teams, I got Seattle as one of those teams. I got Atlanta as another one. I think they have a big bounce back year this year in that NFC South. I think that offense is just too good. They kept their offensive line, 5 first-round picks on that line. Matt Ryan is still Matt Ryan. He's still one of the top quarterbacks in football. Julio Jones, arguably the best wide receiver in football. Arguably, I say. Probably second best behind Michael Thomas. Calvin Ridley is a nice piece. And they got better at running back in Todd Gurley. Sure, they lost Austin Hooper, but I think Hayden Hurst will fill nicely in that role. And their defense, sure, it has some holes, but it's not terrible, in my opinion. And then finally, for my final wildcard spot, and you're going to hate me for this, because I didn't go with Tommy Terrific and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think they make the playoffs. I am going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's going to happen. Kyler Murray in year 2. He's going to be my fantasy football quarterback this year. I'm going to make it happen. Cliff Kingsbury, that offense fits Kyler Murray perfectly. They got him DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, come on. That's bread and butter right there. Kenyon Drake at running back. I like him. He had a really good end of the year for the Cardinals once he got traded. I think that carries over this year. And then their defense, they drafted Isaiah Simmons. There are some other good pieces there with Patrick Peterson. I think that defense can hold up. It won't be a game-breaking D, but I think the Cardinals could definitely make it into the playoffs over Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And right. Did I just say the Cowboys miss the playoffs? I mean, it's the Cowboy way. What can I say?
All right, so the NFC is going to be interesting because we actually have a lot of differences.
Yeah.
When you look at the top, though, there's not much to debate. Niners and Saints, obviously, I think they're going to both win their divisions and probably be the top 2 seeds in the NFC. Mm-hmm. We can just skip past that. Going to the NFC East, I also think the Eagles have the upper hand against Dallas. I think it's going to be close like it was last year. It could even go to their Week 16 matchup of who wins the division there. But if you look at just the matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys strictly, I think the moves that are kind of underrated for both teams, obviously you have like the stars that went to Dallas, like CeeDee Lamb and all that. But the loss of Travis Frederick, and then you look at an Eagles team who has Fletcher Cox, who aside from Aaron Donald is the best defensive interior lineman in the league. And then you get Javon Hargrave from the Steelers, and you have those 2 monsters wreaking havoc on a rookie center, whoever they fill the gap of Travis Frederick with on that Cowboys team. And I think it could be problems, especially not even mentioning how the Cowboys have a much weaker defense than the Eagles, who I just mentioned. They have those 2 players on the inside. They just got Darius Slay. Derek Barnett is making more improvements as he progresses in his career. So I think the Eagles have a slight advantage over the Cowboys. Yet I still have the Cowboys making the playoffs. Because as much as I don't like to admit it, this is a playoff team. And if it's not, then I think they look just take the Browns. Well, the Browns are in a pretty similar situation to the Cowboys, where they had a lot of hype last year, very explosive offenses, didn't make the playoffs, and now this year they get new coaches. The
Cowboys made the playoffs.
Have a lot of pressure on them.
The Cowboys did make the playoffs.
No, the Cowboys didn't make the playoffs.
Did they not? I thought they were wild card.
The Eagles made the playoffs. Cowboys didn't.
No.
It came
right.
Down
to
the
Vikings and the Seahawks were the wild card team. Right.
It came down to that last matchup too.
Right.
I think the Cowboys are a playoff team, though, just based on sheer offensive talent. They're undeniably a top 5 offense. And I think Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. I think he deserves to get paid.
I do as well.
With all those weapons he has around him, I don't see this team not scoring like 30 a game every game. So they'll just blatantly outscore teams to win games. And they have one of the weaker schedules as well, where they're versing weaker offenses who they'll easily outscore no matter how bad their defense is. And it's not terrible, but it's not great. So I think the Cowboys are still a playoff team. I just don't think they win the division.
It's just the Cowboy way, though.
It is the Cowboy way.
It's the Cowboy way.
At the same time, Jason Garrett's gone, and that's a huge reason where that Cowboy way comes into consideration, because he's not a great coach, which is I'm not too thrilled he's our offensive coordinator for the Giants. But that doesn't matter, because I don't have the Giants making the playoffs either, and no one has the Giants making the playoffs because they're not a playoff team. But looking at the final division spot, the NFC North, I think the Vikings are the team to beat in that division, because I
Interesting
think
pick.
what the Packers done, we already said how bad their draft was and how bad their offseason was
Mm-hmm.
and how it's going to mess up a rift between a quarterback who doesn't have a great reputation of getting along with coaches and upper management and that. But the rifts they made this offseason, I think, are just going to, unless Aaron Rodgers has an MVP type season, I don't see them solving this situation. I think it's all downhill here for the Packers because they lost pieces on the defense in Blake Martinez and Kyler Fackrell, who actually both went to the Giants.
Yeah.
They did not address any of the offensive weapons on the outside or any wide receiver position in general. They don't have a great tight end still. I don't know how much Aaron Jones is going to replicate that season he had last year because that kind of came out of nowhere. I still think he's a good running back. He could have a great season, but he was a big reason they won close games last year. I don't know if that continues in this year. And they won almost all the one-score games they played in, which is not going to
That's
happen
true.
again. They're not going to win 13 games again because a lot of those games they won by a hair. And just the risks they made in this offseason, I don't like this Packers team. I don't even think they'll be a playoff team. I think them and the Cowboys can fight for that last spot. But right now, I think the Cowboys made more improvements than declines this offseason. And the
Yeah.
Packers made some of the biggest declines outside of maybe the Patriots that we've seen this offseason.
Yeah,
So
I
I
get.
think the Vikings – all right,
I'll let you
I'll let you
finish.
go.
I'll let you finish.
All right, so I just want to say I think the Vikings are in a better
Mm.
position because they do have those up and down years, as you said. A lot of that has to do with the running back position because Dalvin Cook wasn't healthy until last year, and look what they did when he was healthy. He changes
Mm-hmm.
that offense. He takes so much pressure off of Kirk Cousins. Yes, they did lose Stephon Diggs, but Adam Thielen is now the primary target, and he's worthy of a number one position as a receiver. And then they addressed certain needs in the draft. They had one of the best drafts by far. Drafted 15 players. Most of them could be difference makers, including Justin Jefferson, who's also another weapon for Kirk Cousins to throw to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their head coach is a better head coach. They have a more stable franchise at the moment. They'll be close. There's not much of a discrepancy between these two, but I still like the Vikings. They did beat a very good Saints team in the playoffs last year. Kind of took a lot of people by surprise. This is a team you don't want to mess with. Even though Kirk Cousins might not be an MVP type quarterback, we kind of discredit him for that. He's still a good quarterback and can get this team into a playoff position, which I think they will get to in 2020. Now looking at the wild card spots, I have the Bucs making the playoffs. I don't see how they don't.
Yeah.
We don't mention them in terms of scheduling, but they have a very easy schedule as well. And they just did everything to surround Tom Brady with a championship level team. So if they don't even make the playoffs with this team, I think that says a lot about Tom Brady. Because even though he is 43, their entire offense is full of weapons. They fixed the offensive line in a little bit.
They
With
tried
Tristan
to.
Wirfs. He's not good. But yeah, he's not going to solve the entire offensive line. But it
Right.
wasn't that big of an issue to begin with. He's got countless weapons. He's got a good coach in Bruce Arians. He's in a warm weather state where he doesn't have to play in cold Foxborough anymore. He's in Tampa Bay, living it up with a great defense as well. One of the more underrated defenses. I think on both sides of the ball, they're one of the most balanced teams in the NFL. And just because it is a new quarterback and a quarterback who spent 20 years with one franchise coming to a new franchise, I think maybe at the start they'll have kind of hiccups and stuff like that. But if you look at their schedule, after that first week against the Saints, it's pretty easy for them. So I think the Bucs, just on that, get into the playoffs. I don't think they're better than the Saints, but I think they're a wild card team nonetheless. I already said the Cowboys as a wild card team, and then I also agree the Seahawks are a playoff team. I like the Cardinals. I almost put them for that last playoff spot as well, but I just don't think that DeAndre Hopkins is the difference between like 3-4 wins for this team because 2 years ago they were the worst team in the NFL. Last year they made improvements and won 4 or 5 games or so. But also I don't know how sold I am on Cliff Kingsbury. I know he's a great offensive genius and they have a great offense set in place for him, but that defense still has a lot to prove. They're in a very tough division. And I don't know. I like Kyler Murray to take a big step, almost be an MVP candidate in the season. But I don't know if they're ready to make a playoff push just yet. I think they're more of an 8-8, maybe 9-7 team, just on the cusp of a playoff run. But I don't know if they're there just yet, just because they got DeAndre Hopkins or Isaiah Simmons, who they still don't know where they're going to put him in that defense. I think he'll make plays no matter where he's put, but that has a lot to do. Position has a lot to do with your success in the NFL, so they need to figure that out. And their defense is not a sure thing either. So I'm not totally sold on the Cardinals. I thought for a second they could be a playoff team, but I think teams like the Cowboys, Seahawks, Bucks more in position this year to make a playoff run.
Yeah, I think just circling back to you said the Vikings over the Packers. I think the thing with the Vikings, and the reason why I have the Packers ahead of them, because look at that team as you clench your thirst. I mean, you got
Can't
to.
help myself.
It's yeah. The Packers, they didn't add anything on offense, and Devontae Adams missed significant time and was nagging with that toe injury the whole season. He's going to come back healthy. Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. I think actually A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones could split carries, could actually help that team a little bit. And I just think the Packers are the Packers. I think the drafting of Jordan Love will do the same thing for Aaron Rodgers that it did for Brett Favre, light a fire under his behind. And I think Aaron Rodgers will have his best season in a while now, since that 2014 MVP season. And then the thing with Tampa Bay, sure, Brady's out of Foxborough, but he's in Tampa Bay, where I don't know if you know Tampa Bay, Florida. It rains a lot there. And I think that could have an impact on Brady. Sure, he could deflate the balls like he did against the Indianapolis Colts in Deflategate, but that's not going to fly here. And I don't think he and Bruce Arians are going to mesh like everyone thinks he does. I think Bruce Arians' offense is not going to fit the Brady. Brady's going to want to run his offense his way, similar to how he did in New England. And I don't think Bruce Arians is going to budge that much. But I do like some of your picks. I mean, you can't not go with Tampa Bay. I mean, you kind of have to, given that they have the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably. I personally don't see it's going to happen, but I don't fault you for that. The Vikings, they were a toss-up for me for that final spot. And then your final team was – shoot, who was it? The Seahawks, yeah. The Seahawks are obviously going to make it.
Yeah.
So I like your picks overall. Shifting gears to the final subject, I guess you will, of this episode as we're approaching on 9 o'clock. The last dance has started. I know Ryan desperately wants to finish it. Yeah, good thing.
No, I recorded, so I'm in no rush.
Okay.
I'd rather have good content here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's go week by week. The games that we're most excited for, I'm sure we'll have some similarities, but not always. So let's start with, obviously, week 1. What game in week 1? Well, because the NFL, by the way, did not be like, oh, it's week 1, and we probably won't start week 1. We'll have a bunch of not-so-great games. They threw some pretty good ones at us. But what game in week 1 are you most excited for?
All right. I'll say mine here first, but moving forward, I actually put a couple games because I want us to have different games to analyze for each week. Yeah, so I'll have you go, and then I have multiple on my list so we don't overlap. Okay. But one game, obviously, there's 2 games that are – you just look at the schedule, you're like, man, those are going to be some good games to start the year. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with one. I like the Browns and Ravens game because I like those 2 in this division. I think they're going to be they won't be neck and neck all year, but they're going to be at each other's throats pretty much all year. Both playoff caliber teams with weapons galore, just in terms of talents, some of the most stacked teams in the NFL.
The Browns might have the best offense on paper.
Yeah, and then the Ravens might have the best defense on paper. Yeah. So you just look at the offensive defensive matchup at that. And then it's in Baltimore. They have a lot to answer for what they did in the playoffs last year. The Browns have a lot to answer for what they did all of last season. This is a big game for both teams. This is one of the Ravens' toughest games on the schedule. So if they lose week 1, one of their only real competition games, that's not a great look for the Ravens. If the Browns get off to an 0-1 start, it won't be the end of the world because the Ravens are a great team. But I just think this is a great way to start the season and narratives galore, and I really like this game.
Yeah, I agree. That was in consideration for me. Houston, Kansas City, Thursday night to start the season. That was a consideration. And I also had Cowboys Rams to open up SoFi Stadium. Not that I think the Rams are going to be good at all, but I feel like that has some intrigue to it. But the game I went to, it's got to be Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Yeah, Tom Brady, his first game playing for the Patriots, not playing for the Patriots since he was at Michigan. He goes to New Orleans, who arguably have the best offense in the entire NFC. I mean, and also you get the return of Rob Gronkowski to play with Tom Brady. I don't think Gronk's going to be a world beater this year. I don't think he's going to play great. But it's just to have Gronk there, that, person, I don't even call him a human because he's just not from this planet. Barely. Let's be real here. And also, an interesting set. The Saints opened up as like a 6.5-point favorite. If that holds until the beginning of week 1, that'll be the first time since like 72 games that Tom Brady wasn't the favorite entering a regular season game. Interesting point to note. But I think overall, Brady, Breeze has the upper hand in that series for those two in their careers. Storylines galore, like you said, for the Ravens-Browns. I think this game has some of the great storylines.
And actually, before we go on to week 2, you did mention that Cowboys-Rams game.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is interesting because this could be a trap game for the Cowboys.
Oh, big time.
So much hype going into this season. The Rams and their new stadium opening up. And like I mentioned, with Travis Frederick leaving, that's a huge miss for the Cowboys. And they're versing Aaron Donald against a possibly rookie center. I think he's going to wreak havoc on them all game. Their offense might be disoriented in a new system with a new coach, just learning the playbook. With a new CeeDee Lamb, that'll be his first game, so he won't be as big a threat. And they've got Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald and other types on the defense to kind of shut down this high-powered Dallas team at home. I think this could be a trap game. I don't think the Rams are a better team than the Cowboys, but I can see, in a very Dallas way, all this hype going into L.A. and then losing. That could be a trap game to look out for.
Honestly, what might happen, like Dallas, they know what it's like to lose in the first game of a new stadium because Eli Manning signed the wall after he did it to them. When AT&T Stadium opened up, oh God, that's brought music to my heart.
One of the only openers we've gotten against the Cowboys, but it was the one that mattered for sure.
Of course. Shifting to week 2, though, for me, this is a no-brainer. It's Ravens-Houston. Sure, Houston's not what it once was, obviously losing DeAndre Hopkins, but probably not the last time we'll see either of these two teams we'll talk about. Because these teams are going to be in the consideration. Ravens for the number 1 seed in the Super Bowl, Texans for the playoffs. Deshaun Watson versus Lamar Jackson. It just would be fun, despite Watson not having Hopkins. Like I said, Jackson is the league's reigning MVP. He possibly could even have a better year than last year. Let's be real, because I'm sure he wants to continue to throw the ball and prove. I think there are still people out there. He said, "Oh, he's just a running back that just plays quarterback." He's not anymore.
Still saying that you can't take their opinion into credibility.
Let me just be clear. I don't think that. But
no reasonable sports analyst believes that anymore, and
never
maybe
should. Colin Cowherd, but neither.
I like Colin.
I do too.
Colin. He don't think that anymore.
But I think Lamar Jackson has even more to prove this year, and I'm just excited to watch. Get your popcorn ready, as Terrell Owens would say.
Every Ravens game, you could argue. I mean, they do have a weaker schedule, so there were some not as good opponents, but they're Showtime pretty much. They're one of the teams in the league where every game, because they have Lamar Jackson, is kind of a must-watch game. I went a different route for week 2. I think the AFC West has 2 new stadium openings on week 2 that are pretty noteworthy. The first one, Chiefs at Chargers. That's a big game for the Chargers because they have some pretty good hype going into this season. I think defensively they matched up to kind of limit a Chiefs offense, even though there is no limit to that offense. They did the best they could to kind of counteract Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. This is coming off the Super Bowl. There's still going to be kind of that Super Bowl hype. And then moving into that new LA stadium, I think this is a big game for both teams. And then this is more because of the stadium. You look at the Monday Night Football game between the Saints and the Raiders. I think the Saints easily win that one. I don't think the Raiders are going to be a good team this year. But it's Vegas. It's its first game ever.
And it's the Raiders. It's Chucky and the Raiders. I mean, come on. Yeah. And I was just thinking about this because we'll shift to week 3. The Ravens open up with a gauntlet. We said that they have the easiest schedule, but they go Browns. Is that game on the road or is that home?
Browns is at home.
Okay, Browns at home, Texans on the road, and then week 3, my marquee game for that one is Kansas City at Baltimore. The reigning league MVP versus the MVP of 2018. The reigning Super Bowl champs against a team who wants to make it on Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football has got some great games this year. And Joe Tessitore and Booger McFarland are not coming back. So Monday Night Football, center stage for Jackson and Mahomes. The last 2 MVPs, like I said, could be a high-scoring affair. Could even possibly break the record that the Chiefs and the Rams set a couple of seasons ago. I honestly think it could be that good, despite the Ravens having a really good defense. Don't call me for that game because I will not pick up my phone. Let's be clear. I will be yelling at my TV, especially if I have a fantasy player on that roster, because it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, there's a reason they scheduled this for week 3. They want to
Mhm.
make sure that Mahomes and Lamar are both available because this is going to be a showdown, and this could easily be the game of the year. Only 3 weeks into the season. I mean, this is going to be a showdown of the likes of possibly that Chiefs Rams historic game of 2 years ago. So that's obviously the marquee matchup of that week and possibly the year.
Yeah.
But then, if we want to bury it a little bit, I also look at the Cowboys visiting the Seahawks as a pretty big game, especially if the Cowboys do end up maybe losing that first week trap game to the Rams. Then they have a home game. Then they fly back out west to visit the Seahawks and that tough team out there. Two
Mhm.
playoff caliber teams, I think, will be fighting for wild card spots. I think that could be an interesting game as well.
And you mentioned the Seahawks. I think they fly like 29,000 miles or something crazy like that this year because of where they're located. Obviously, there's no teams in the Pacific Northwest. Pacific Northwest. Wow, tongue twister. Other than Seattle, whereas the Raiders, I think, fly only like 6,000 for comparison. So Seattle is going to have a tough year, but they deal with it well every single year. And I like that pick because if the Cowboys go 1-1 to start the season, that Seattle game could be the beginning of the end for the Cowboys so early in the year. Week 4, I'm going to go with an interesting pick here. I'm going to go LA Chargers at Tampa Bay. I think possibly by this point, Justin Herbert could be starting, maybe be a battle of the old guard versus the new guard in Brady versus Herbert. And obviously, what we said before, the Chargers defense is so good. That could be a game where Brady gets beat up big time. And that could be one of those games where on Monday morning, Monday afternoon, on all the sports shows, they're like, oh, Tom Brady shouldn't have left New England. He got beat up badly by the Chargers. This Tampa Bay team's not going to be good. And I think that could be a game where if they lose, that could light a fire under Brady and the Buccaneers. So that game, I think, will be really, really exciting.
Yeah, I like that pick. Both teams made a lot of moves in the offseason, very new look teams. Got a lot of players on both sides of the ball, especially offensively.
Mm-hmm.
There's star power everywhere. But I think the biggest matchup of that week is Sunday Night Football, Eagles visiting Niners. And I
Yeah.
say this because this is the first time the Niners will be in the national spotlight since they lost a 10-point lead to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They have a lot to answer for that downfall. The first 3 weeks of the season, Cardinals, Jets, Giants, should be 3-0
Cakewalks.
coming into this matchup, and they're playing at home at Sunday night against a good Eagles team. This will test them. This will be the first game where all eyes are on them, and they answer
Mm-hmm.
everything that happened last year. And whether they win or lose this game can go a long way to how their season turns out. I think this is a huge game for the Niners, a turning point for their season, and a great matchup between two really good playoff teams in the NFC.
Huge game for the Eagles, too, because if they could win that game, that sky's the limit for them. They could be like, we could beat anyone because we just beat the defending NFC champions in the Niners, who, by the way, didn't lose a game until week 8 of last year or something crazy like that.
Which I think could easily be the same this year because aside from that game, they don't really have a challenge until week 8, which is the Seahawks, who I believe is the team that beat them week 8 last year as well.
Yeah.
So it's almost the same view as last year.
Mm-hmm.
But now they have a Super Bowl trip on their belt. Will that Super Bowl hangover come into effect, especially against the Eagles team, who was a playoff team despite all the injuries they had? They only got better this year. Carson Wentz is on a mission. That could be also another game of the year candidate.
Yeah.
So we have two back week 3 and week 4. There's some big matchups between both the Super Bowl teams and also playoff teams.
Yeah, like I said earlier, the NFL did not play conservative. They put some heavy hitters every single week, especially early on, even though if the coronavirus pandemic continues into September and maybe into October, the season gets pushed back a little bit. The NFL is like, if we can play, we're going to come out swinging because we want our fans to tune in. Week number 5, I'm going to go with Minnesota at Seattle. I think we had the birth of primetime Kirk Cousins last year, and he will have the opportunity to show if this is a thing of the future. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks in Seattle, if there are fans there, we know how good Seattle's home field advantage is. And if not, Seattle is still a really good team. I think both of these teams will have eyes on the playoffs, and this could be one of those games where when you're looking at toward week 16 and 17, wild card spots, people will look back at this game and be like, the winner of this game will probably be the one that makes the playoffs over the other.
I like that pick. Looking into week 5, also looking to our fan bias a little bit, I
Yeah.
had to have the Giants in one game this year. They're not going to have many noteworthy
I didn't
games.
have him
They're
in
not
any
a
of my
playoff
plans.
team, and they might get crushed when they verse actually good teams. But this could be a pretty important week for the Giants. We're visiting the Cowboys, which is usually, as we mentioned, a week 1 matchup, but now it's relegated to week 5. It's the Jason Garrett return game. He's coming back to Dallas. Does he have some insight that the Giants can use to maybe upset a team in Dallas that at this point they could either be 4-0, killing on the season, all hype in the world, or that Rams game, they played the Browns at that point. They could have maybe a couple losses on the belt and almost be a must-win game at home against an inferior Giants team. And just when you look at these teams as well, you look at Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott, two of the best backs, most dynamic backs in the league. I think they both go off in this game, put on a show, and this could be actually one of the more interesting games for the Giants and the Cowboys, respectively. This is pretty much a must-win for the Cowboys, and anything goes for the Giants. They have nothing to lose here. They don't really have expectations. If they can upset a division rival, a rival that they have very rich history with in the Cowboys, Giants-Cowboys. I mean, you look at the Giants-Eagles, they have some very good rivalry games as well. But personally, as a Giants fan, I despise the Cowboys more than the Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
This is a rivalry game to the fullest extent, and this is the game I'm looking at in week 5.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think especially if the Cowboys start slow, like we've mentioned, that is a must-win game for them. If they lose, it's downhill from there. Week 6, I have the Cowboys as my marquee game. I have the Arizona Cardinals going to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Packers, Bucks was in consideration, but I'm tired of giving love to Tom Brady all the darn time, even though he is one of the greatest. But I think with that Kyler Murray-led offense and Cliff Kingsbury and DeAndre Hopkins, this could be an early game for the Cowboys, like we've said repeatedly, that if things go slow, one of these games, I said the Cardinals are going to make the playoffs over the Cowboys. So if the Cardinals can win this game, this could be another one of those games, like I said, in week 5, where people look back on and be like, this is where the Cardinals secured their spot in the playoffs, winning the games against the teams that you think are going to be in the hunt. And I think the Cardinals can actually go into Dallas and take it right out of the Cowboys under Jerry Jones's nose, and he will be fuming after this one because I think the Cardinals win. But
yeah, and they're pretty similar teams. They're both heavily reliant on their offensive firepower and lack of defensive strength, and that could be a game with playoff implications in the NFC. I like that game. I'm gonna go in a different direction. Week 6, I like the Chiefs at the Bills in this game. This could be a big game to put the Bills on the map. First of all, you look at the quarterbacks. Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, two of the strongest arms in the league. They're going to be slinging it all game long. Bills finally have a playmaker in Stephon Diggs to pair with speedsters and John Brown and
Cole Beasley
on Cole Beasley as well. So now he has some more viable weapons on the offense to kind of go head-to-head with a Pat Mahomes team. And this is also in Buffalo, favors them a little bit. But if the Bills can upset the Chiefs, it puts them on notice because a lot of people have them as winning the division, being a playoff team again. But I don't think people realize how dangerous this team could be and how big a threat they are in the AFC. Because not only we mentioned their offense, but defensively,
I was just about
have
to
one
say.
of the best defenses in the league against this firepower offense with the Chiefs. This is a big game for both teams. If the Chiefs lose, it's not the end of the world. If the Bills win, everyone's going to be talking about them.
Yeah,
Everyone.
That Bills defense is sneaky good. I think if they could win this game, they could definitely be in contention for a first-round bye. I think it's definitely in the cards. Week 7, I'm going to go with Packers at Texans for this one. There's a lot of rumors surrounding the Packers and the future of Aaron Rodgers. When will Jordan Love play? Is it this year? Is it next year? Is it 3-4 years down the road? Who knows? And then both these teams have just a lot of questions in general. Bill O'Brien and the relationship with him and Deshaun Watson, who's the coach of the Packers, Matt LaFleur, and his relationship with Aaron Rodgers. I think just an interesting game because both of these teams are playoff teams from last year, are still on paper not horrible, but that relationship between head coach and quarterback come week 7, who knows where they are, both these teams. There could be a lot of fireworks in those respective locker rooms, and I think it would just be fun to watch those two teams square off.
Yeah,
I wish that game was in Lambeau.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, especially later in the season.
Oh, yeah.
Those teams are also in very similar situations, as you mentioned. Obviously, Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers, their teams will go as far as they take them because in the offseason, their front office and head coaches kind of let them down. And they both were playoff teams. Who knows if they'll make the playoffs because of that? It all depends on how well they do. And this head-to-head matchup is going to be a firecrackers galore in just terms of the quarterback talent in that matchup. I like that. I'm going to go with Seahawks visiting the Cardinals, though, for Week 7 because the Seahawks are the one team the Cardinals beat last year. They lost twice to the Rams and twice to the Niners. They split with the Seahawks. So if they really want to make a playoff push, beating a team like the Seahawks at home, especially if the Seahawks are rolling at this point, could be huge for this Cardinals team. In terms of offense, they have the weapons to go at a Seahawks defense, which is not as strong as it used to be. And I think this could be a high-scoring affair. Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, another great quarterback matchup. And I think the Cardinals could actually win this one. So this could be a big game for the Cardinals. And before we go to Week 8, another game I'd like to mention. It's not going to be a great game, but it's got a little storyline to it. Niners and Pats. Jimmy G's coming back to town. And he's going to show them what they could have had at this point if they kept on to him and if Robert Kraft didn't send them to the Niners. Instead of seeing what they have with Jarrett Stidham with the absence of Tom Brady now, they would have had Jimmy G and would have been in a lot more comfort than what they have currently with no Brady and Stidham in a prove-it year.
Yeah, I do think that will be interesting. But do you really think, though, that Jimmy G would be who he is had he stayed under Brady and Belichick in Brady's shadow? I don't think he would. I think he would be a lot greener, if you will. He wouldn't be this guy who's, I wouldn't say necessarily proven himself, but had a lot more, I guess, battle experience, if you will. I don't think he'd have that in New England, obviously, given how long Brady was there for. So I think I don't know. I just don't feel like that's a huge off-the-wall game. I get what you're saying, your argument, but I personally don't agree with it. I will watch it. Let's be real here. But shifting to Week 8, go ahead.
I just wanted one quick thing. Obviously, if you were to sit behind Brady for like 5 years of his career, that wouldn't be great for him.
Yeah.
But sure, you wouldn't know this. This is more hindsight. He was injured the year before, so he didn't even play no matter what. He was injured, so he didn't play. He would have sat behind Brady, didn't play. The only difference is this last year where he did go to the Super Bowl, which is a huge difference between sitting behind Tom Brady. But I don't think it would have impacted his game that much because he's pretty much, before this past season, only had 10 or so games under his belt. So he hasn't had much experience even this late into his career. But yeah, I just think it's going to be fun. I think he might go off this game just to show the Pats what they could have had they kept on to him. He could have been the new face of the New England Patriots.
How different the NFL would be if Jimmy G had not been traded, because who knows if the Niners would have had the success they've had, where the Patriots would be, just the NFL in general. The Packers might have been to that Super Bowl instead of the Kansas City Chiefs. Who knows? Week 8, and I'm not going to lie, Week 8, 9, and 10 are all 49ers games because this is a gauntlet stretch for them. First off, they go to Seattle. These two teams fought hard last year. They were very close games, especially that Week 17 game for them. It came down to, I think, one of the final plays of the game. And for both these teams in the NFC West, they're going to be fighting for that division once again, I think, this year. And I think that will be a crucial game for the Niners.
Yeah, I had that game as well. I'm going to go with a different NFC divisional game. Cowboys visiting Eagles Sunday night. That's a big game as well. It's the first of their two matchups. They meet in Week 16. Both these games, they meet Week 8, then they meet the last two games of the season. So this will be their first crack at one another. And they're both in head-to-head battles for the top seed in their respective divisions. So this game could give them great leverage going further into the season, especially if they can one up the other. Eagles at home should be favored. And as we said, we kind of like the Eagles more in a matchup against the Cowboys anyway. It'll be interesting to see how that comes to fruition. Week 8. Another game to just note, it's not in terms of gameplay, it's more storyline. It's another New England type storyline. Tom Brady coming back to face the Giants Monday night.
Yeah.
With the history he's had with the Giants. Sure, it's not
Eli Manning in that defense, but
yeah, and Eli Manning's not there anymore. It's not the same, but
on Monday Night
Tom
Football,
Brady coming back to his old foe, our New York Giants. So just note that.
I'll watch that game for sure. Week 9, the second one of those Niners games, Green Bay visit them. Last year, the Niners blew them out twice. I think, honestly, it probably will happen again. Let's be real, because the Packers are not on the same level as the Niners. But rematch of that NFC Championship game. This game's on Thursday Night Football. That's the thing. Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football. Some really good games top to bottom this year. So this is the only game of the night. So you better bet that I will be glued to my TV unless something crazy. Oh, no, that probably is the day where I have BDJ 464. So if it's Packers Day, I'm screwed. But if I don't.
Shoot, I do too then.
Yeah. If I don't, I am watching this game because Packers at Niners. It's just something about it. Those two teams and their history as well.
Like rich history, yeah.
Yeah. It's just something about those two teams. Whenever they play, you just got to watch as a football fan.
Yeah, Week 9 is pretty stacked when you look at it. I like that game a lot. I'm not going to go into this game, but another game of note, Saints-Bucks Part 2, Sunday Night Football. Obviously going to be a great game, big game, lots of storylines. I'm going to go for more of an underrated type of game here. Ravens visiting the Colts. Because, again, Ravens have a pretty weak schedule. This is one of their only matchups that I think could give them trouble. And I know this doesn't mean much, but I thought this was pretty interesting. So Lamar Jackson has only lost 5 games in his NFL career. One of them was to Phillip Rivers in the playoffs his rookie year. Phillip Rivers is now on the Colts. Colts play at home.
Colts have a good offense.
They have a very good offense with a nice running game with multiple running backs who could pound the rock on a good offensive line, just like the Ravens. So they match up pretty well. I think these are both division winners. It's one of the better teams the Ravens play. Can Lamar overcome Rivers despite losing in that playoff game? Obviously, I think Lamar's a better player, but it's just interesting to see that one of the only players to beat him was Phillip Rivers. So now he gets a little crack at him again in a different uniform.
I like that pick there. Week 10, the third part of this Niners trilogy, and I think the last time I have them. Nope, I lied. Not the last time I have them on my top games list. San Francisco at New Orleans. That game last year was so much fun to watch. It came down to the wire. And I think Emmanuel Sanders will be the difference in this one because he's now on the Saints, not on the Niners. And I think that could be another weapon for Breeze. That was the one thing they needed last year. Someone at wide receiver other than Michael Thomas for Breeze to throw to. They now have it in Emmanuel Sanders. I think in New Orleans should be another game where you have to watch. And that Saint offense versus that Niners defense especially. And the Niners secondary, which is not over the moon. It's really their pass rush. So if Breeze has time to throw, Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, they could have a good game. Obviously barring an injury because we're getting into the heart of the season at this point.
Yeah. I also had that game as one of them, so I went with another game, just had some variety. I like this game. I think this could be one of the best Thursday Night Football games of the year. Colts at Titans. I just mentioned the Colts with the Ravens game, so they're coming off a short week, so that could be a little trouble for the Colts. But if they win against the Ravens, they have a lot of momentum coming into this game on the road against a tough Titans team. Both teams, I think, will be fighting for their division crown, even though the Texans could squeak in there with Deshaun Watson, depending how their season goes. But I think these two are the head of the AFC North or AFC South. Titans are at home. This could be a big game for the Titans in terms of the division race if they beat the Colts. If the Colts come off a win or loss at the Ravens and take down the Titans on the road, could be a huge game for the Colts as well.
Yeah, I agree. This could be another that stretch of games for the Colts could build their playoff resume as here in the middle of the season. Once they get toward the end of the year, they beat the Ravens, beat the Titans. Who knows what could happen for them? Week 11, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Burrow, Young, Bengals at Redskins, number 1 versus number 2. Do I need to say more? Let's be real here.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of games I like.
There are,
slate. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. So I like the Chargers at the Broncos. I think this is the first time they meet, and these two are going to be fighting for a wild card spot because obviously the Chiefs probably win that division, be the top there. And these two are very strong teams in that same division, have a lot to prove, made a lot of moves in the offseason, including a couple of inter-team moves. You had Chris Harris going from Broncos to the Chargers.
Melvin Gordon.
As well, to mention Melvin Gordon, Chargers to the Broncos. So they made some switches amongst each other and just in the offseason as a whole. At this point, maybe Justin Herbert starting. We don't know. Him against Drew Lock, that could be a good young quarterback matchup as well. I like that game. As you mentioned, first, second round pick going at it. Week 11 is notable as well. Then you have that Titans-Ravens rematch game. think the Ravens easily win that one. They got Calais Campbell to try to stop Derrick Henry, who ran rampant on them divisional round last year. But also, a game I really like is Falcons at Saints. Because
I agree.
the Falcons have a pretty easy schedule in the beginning of the year, but this game is big for them. So if they have, I think they could have a good record at the start of the year, build some hype, be a possible playoff team. But this Saints team could turn it all around. If they lose to the Saints team, that'd almost be a wake-up call that this team is not ready, and then they have tougher games following that. They could go in a tailspin and fall out of playoff contention. If they win their easier scheduled games at the beginning of the year, then take down the Saints team on the road, which they've done like last year. I'm pretty sure they beat them on the road, and they could very well do again with this new weapons on the offense like Todd Gurley and such. And they're coming off a bye as well, week 10, so they'll be fresh for the Saints team, have a lot of scouting on them. I think this could be a very big game for the Falcons.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. Week 12. Let's try Thanksgiving week. This week is actually really good. You got Bears at Packers, Seattle at Philadelphia. This is the week where Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady square off Tampa Bay and Kansas City in Tampa. Should be interesting. And you got, like we mentioned a little earlier, Ravens at Steelers on Thanksgiving night. But the game I'm going to go with is Redskins at Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Do I think that the Redskins are going to be a playoff team? Not at all. Not even close. But there's something about these two when they play on Thanksgiving that adds a little bit extra to it. And who knows by this point, week 12, where the Cowboys stand. They could be even with the Eagles, behind the Eagles in the division. And you hear the critics in the media being like, oh, God, Dak Prescott shouldn't be the quarterback of the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy was a terrible hire. Jerry Jones, blah, 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 this, and that. This will be a huge game for the Cowboys, especially if they are below expectations. If they're above expectations, who cares? They lose. If they win that game, it's just a game they're supposed to win. They lose. Obviously, they lose. But this will be a huge game for the Cowboys. One other game I note, and I'm sorry, I'm probably taking all the games from you. Chargers at Bills. Just something interesting there.
That's a good game as well. Going to that Cowboys point, it's pretty similar to last year, how they pretty much fell apart at that Thanksgiving loss to the Bills. That was the turning point in their season where they lost the division lead to the Eagles, who eventually won it and went to the playoffs while they didn't and sat at home instead. So if they lose another Thanksgiving game to a much inferior opponent in the Redskins, that could be a very big loss for the Cowboys. But I'm going to look to the Monday night game of that week. A very good week, slated games from Thursday on Thanksgiving to Sunday night, to all those games on Sunday. I like this Monday night game where the Seahawks are visiting the Eagles, a playoff rematch. Both teams hopefully will be healthy this time because injuries riddled both teams last year in the playoffs. I don't think we really got a good sense of where each team is at. I think matchup-wise, this is a very good game. If both teams are healthy, you have Carson Wentz and Russell Wilson at full strength going at it with playoff intentions on the line. I think that could be a very interesting game, Week 12.
Yep, I like that thought indeed. Week 13, for me, if Tua is starting, give me Bengals at Dolphins all day. Obviously, if Tua is not starting at this point, there are some really good games on the slate. This is the week where Dallas goes to Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. But I'm going to go with Cleveland at Tennessee. If the Browns are underperforming, similar to the Cowboys, they're calling for Baker. They're calling for Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. Odell probably will be frustrated. Jarvis will be frustrated. That whole organization. But if the Browns are thriving, going into Tennessee with Derrick Henry running the ball like a madman. The Titans beat the Browns last year, early in the year, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was week 1 as I got an itch in my eye. Sorry about that. But that game, I think, would just be fun to watch. It's an early game on CBS. I think if Romo and they probably won't be calling it, but if Romo and Jim Nantz are there, should be fun indeed to watch. Browns at Titans.
Like that pick. I'm going to go Sunday Night Football, Broncos at Chiefs.
Thought about it.
We'll have a lot of divisional implications on the line, especially if the Broncos are having such a transcendent season. They might be challenging the Chiefs for that top spot. I think it's definitely Chiefs first, and then Broncos Chargers are right up against them. But I think the Broncos might separate themselves from the Chargers a little bit. I think they're a better team. So if they're making a a push for that divisional spot. This could be a very big game in Kansas City. It'll be a tough one in prime time. Don't think Drew Luck will be able to help play Patrick Mahomes, but it's a very important and interesting game nonetheless.
Yeah, and I think another game of note, that Monday night game, Buffalo at San Francisco. We're entering December. This could be a game where seeding comes into play. Because the Niners have a lot of competition at the top of the NFC. You got New Orleans. You got Green Bay could be up there. Tampa obviously could be in the hunt. Seattle could be in the hunt. Who knows who else? If they lose to Buffalo, that helps Buffalo's chances of getting a bye and hurts San Francisco's greatly. So that's a game of note.
And we talked about the Bills maybe being the Chiefs being a turning point for them. Imagine beating the Niners as well.
Yeah.
They
beat both of them.
The narrative.
Holy
cow.
My
God. Yeah.
Week 14.
The NFL on fire.
Week 14. I thought about going Browns-Ravens Part 2. I wrote it in my original article on usports.org. If you haven't read it, highly recommend. Sorry, I had to plug.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug indeed. But I am going to go with Minnesota at Tampa Bay. Another game that can have playoff implications. Minnesota, I think Kirk Cousins going to Florida could have some success down there. Who knows? Brady, who knows what that NFC South is going to be like. If the Saints are running away with it and they're fighting with Atlanta for that wildcard spot, this could be a game for Brady where they don't win, they probably miss the playoffs. It would be that close. But
yeah,
Browns, Ravens were definitely a consideration for me, given that game's on Monday night. But I'm going to go with Vikings at Buccaneers.
Yeah, that's a good game. Also, Ravens, Browns, Part 2. That's obviously going to be very important for both teams.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with Saints at Eagles, though.
I like that game.
Obviously, another matchup between two NFC powerhouses. They both also have kind of similar offensive strategies in that they have their quarterback, Carson Wentz, Drew Brees. They also have very good backups who they might utilize into their offense in some way, shape, or form. With Jalen Hurts now on the Eagles, you had Taysom Hill, who's kind of the Jalen Hurts replica in a way. They might want to use him in that gadget type of sense where it takes the top off of an offense or of a defense and leaves them guessing because what are they going to use him for? They can use him in so many ways, very versatile. That could be interesting to see if they use those two in that game specifically. It's also a game for the Eagles at home. It could be a big one in terms of playoff momentum. The Saints should be favored. They are on paper the better team, but I think this would be a very good matchup as well.
Yeah, I do agree. Saints-Eagles, that could be another game. I know I've been saying it a lot, but we're getting toward the end of the year. We just mentioned Week 14. Playoff implications are huge late in the year, and if you can beat teams who you think are going to be in the playoffs, those games matter big time. Week 15, we're getting to Sunday, December 20th. That's the week. Obviously, there's a Thursday night game too, but that's Chargers-Raiders, so who really cares? Raiders are going to stink. Broncos-Bills was in consideration for me because that game, both of those teams will be fighting
battle.
Defensive war, I think. Like Bills defense versus that Broncos offense. But there's really one game that far is superior to everything else. Chiefs at New Orleans in the Superdome. If they're fans, that could be a game where Patrick Mahomes, we see him for the first time in his career ever rattled. I wouldn't be surprised if he's rattled in that one. If there's no fans, it's obviously a whole lot different. But I think those two offenses, that firepower, and those defenses can make plays. They have shown from time to time. But Breeze versus Mahomes, guys who could sling it all the way around, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce on one end, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara on another. It's just offense galore. If you're a fan of the modern NFL, this is the game for you.
Yeah, very exciting matchup. Quick question for you. Super Bowl preview?
No.
Possibly?
No. I don't think the
don't
Chiefs
like the Saints?
I don't like the Chiefs.
Chiefs. Really?
I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they make the Super Bowl.
All right, we'll talk about that a different day, but
I think that
could definitely
big trust. Woo. Ravens are my pick.
They'll be in their way because we didn't see the Chiefs versus the Ravens in the playoffs last year, which could have prevented the Chiefs from going to the Super Bowl. We don't know because we didn't see it. So I think this is definitely a Super Bowl preview possibility. But the game I'm going to go with a pretty good storyline here, Sunday Night Football, Niners at Cowboys. Depending on where playoffs rank for each team, Niners could either be top of the NFC and not really matter as much, or they could be in a battle with the Seahawks trying to win that first spot, trying to get a first-round bye. It could be a very important game for them as they go to Dallas, who knows if they'll be either a top team in the NFC or just scratching in, trying to make a playoff run. But also, this is a narrative-based game between two pretty doubted quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You have Jimmy Garoppolo, who people hate on because it's hard. He gets a lot of hate because the Niners team is so good, and he's just not one of the better players on the team, but he just doesn't have to be. He kind of game manages to where he lets all the talent around him do the work. He just tries not to mess up and makes smart plays in an efficient offense. But with the missed throw last year in the Super Bowl, them losing that due to a 10-point comeback from the Chiefs, there's a little doubt on him, on whether he's worth the money they paid him. And then also, obviously, with Dak Prescott, if you're talking about money and contracts, that's been a continuous talk for almost 2 years now. Man can't seem to get the respect he deserves in terms of money on paper, because considering he's made like less than $6 million in his entire career, he just wants to get some bread, which he has deserved. He deserves his bread because he has been a leader for this Cowboys team. Sure, it hasn't really resulted in playoff wins, but he's gotten this young team to the playoffs before. They could easily do it again this year. It's a big matchup, though. Sunday Night Football, Week 15, playoff teams. One of them needs to show up and shut the negative narrative on them, and they can easily do that in this game.
Big time, I agree. We're entering the home stretch, Week 16. There's a Christmas Day game.
That's interesting. Friday.
Finally, the NFL does something on Christmas because the NBA owns Christmas, and they got a good game, Minnesota at New Orleans, a rematch of that playoff game from a year ago. Should be fun to watch if everyone is healthy. But I'm going to go with – in my original article, I said San Francisco at Arizona because Arizona will be fighting for that playoff spot, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with Denver at the Chargers. This game –
big game.
Huge game. If either of these teams want to make the playoffs, they have to win this one at the end of the year. This will be a game. There's this week as general playoff implications galore, top to bottom. I'm sure you'll mention a couple of one especially. I hope you mention. If not, I will jump on you for that. But Broncos, Chargers should be a big-time game. And who knows, if Justin Herbert's starting, this is where we really get to see, is he legit? Because the Chargers, if they're fighting for a playoff spot with Herbert at quarterback, we'll really get to see, is this guy as hyped up as he should be? Or does he really crumble under the pressure and he was just benefiting from the Oregon system that he was in?
Yeah, that's a very big game in terms of the AFC West playoff picture. As you mentioned, Vikings at Saints. Boy, did they have a history. This should be a fun one. Another playoff implication game. Both teams should be fighting for the top of their division at that point. And it's interesting because given that the NBA season is getting pushed back, it's sounding like they might start the season in December. Whether that's
they might start it on Christmas.
Not, it might start it on Christmas because they do have a tradition of having very big games on Christmas. So if they start their season in December, they most likely will start on Christmas. Now they have a very big NFL game to compete with at 4 o'clock as well. So that could take almost 2 games of NBA action just with this big matchup on Christmas. So interesting how the NFL kind of showing off its dominance and saying, hey, you might own Christmas, but we're so big, we're just going to come on Christmas, crash your party, and give you this big game, Week 16 with playoffs right around the corner. So I'm very interested in that game. But I'm going to go with the game. I'm assuming you'll jump on me if I don't predict, or not predict, but mention Eagles at Cowboys.
Yeah.
Yes, that is.
I figured I'd let you have
huge.
The easy one.
Yeah, this is definitely the easy one because just like last year, I think it'll come down to Week 16 on where these teams will go in terms of playoffs. Because last year, it was whoever wins this game pretty much makes the playoffs.
And last year, that game was in Philly. That game was in Philly last year, which hurt the Cowboys.
Dallas this season. Yeah, now it's in Dallas. I don't think it's win or go home almost. I think both teams are still playoff teams. But I think it's division crown on the line with these two pretty neck-and-neck teams, definitely ahead of the rest of the competition in their division. Going into this season, expected to be one of these two teams come up on top. Week 16, we'll find out who will come out on top.
Yeah, I agree completely. Personally, if the Cowboys don't win this game, they're not making the playoffs. I've said it already. They're not making the playoffs, but
it depends. We mentioned them a lot in this podcast. Their season
they're the Cowboys.
So many ways because
they're America's team.
They're just such a big storyline, and they have so many big names and egos and
question marks.
Everything. The Cowboys have question marks. They've had plenty of those as well. They also have talent, and I think that's what will bring them to the playoff game. But last game of the year,
17. Yeah,
finally got to Week 17. I'm gonna let you go with what team you're looking or what game you're looking at in this one. This one should be pretty fairly obvious as well.
I mean, it is kind of obvious. I'm going to take a cop-out answer, though. I'm going to say all of them. I'm going to have as many screens as I possibly can for this week because it's the division week, the final week of the season, barring weeks getting shifted around. Playoff implications on the line galore. If I had to pick one game, it's Seattle at San Francisco, the last game of the regular season. At least that's how it's scheduled. But if you're gonna watch a game, just watch all of them because they're all going to be probably good in some capacity. Because teams, you're going to have coaches fighting for their jobs, teams fighting for playoff spots, just overall top to bottom. And obviously fantasy implications on the line, although I suck at fantasy football, as you know, so I probably won't be in the championship by this point.
I had a heartbreaking experience last year, week 17. I lost.
Oh, yeah,
I ended up losing. Did I tell you about that?
I think you did, yeah.
Less than a point in the championship game.
Yeah.
All because they took Zeke out. Because at that point, that's when the Eagles were crushing the Giants. They already made the playoffs. So the Cowboys were like, oh, we're done. So they sat Zeke, who was on my fantasy squad, and needed 8-9 more total yards to win me the fantasy championship. But as you can tell by my attitude, we know how that went for me.
So I don't take Cowboys players anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to root for them. But in that case, he's 9 yards. Is that too much to ask?
That's all you need.
Well over 1,000 last year. Can't get 9 more.
Yeah,
but so week 17, Seahawks Niners, obviously the big one. They ended the 100th NFL season last year with a great matchup where the Niners barely squeaked by and got that first seed, which was huge for them. Who knows if they make the Super Bowl out that first seed? That's a big game. And I also look at the Steelers and Browns as a very big game. Because I think the Ravens will easily win the division. Both these teams are looking at playoff spots similar to the Broncos and Chargers, week 16, how that's going to indicate where playoff teams unfold. Steelers-Brown, a big matchup between two very good defenses, very kind of controversial quarterbacks in Baker Mayfield and kind of Ben Roethlisberger, whoever's starting. Maybe Cam's on the team by then. Who knows?
Maybe it's Duck Hodges.
But either way, could be Duck Hodges for all we know. Either way, that's a big game for both teams. And this could be the game that maybe sends the Browns to the playoffs for the first time
in forever.
20 years or so, 19
in our lifetime.
Years. I've never seen the Browns in the playoffs. I know you haven't either. So that's a big game.
I agree. One other game to note for that, Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Just who knows? I think there are the games that you should watch out for are the games where you have the teams who you expect in the playoffs. So a team like New Orleans, a team like Green Bay, a team like Baltimore. They're playing games against inferior opponents. Green Bay plays the Bears. Baltimore plays Cincinnati. New Orleans plays Carolina. Philadelphia plays Washington. All those teams, if they lose, that could be a huge game in terms of morale. We saw it with the Patriots. They went from the 2 to the 3 seed, and then it got bounced in the playoffs in the first round. It can impact seeding. Obviously, we think some teams will probably square it away. We think Baltimore will be squared away in the playoffs and their seed by that point. But losing week 17 game and then going into the playoffs could be a very big morale negative or morale hurter for any team. So if you lose a game that you're supposed to win to a division foe in week 17, it could really hurt a team and change the landscape of the playoffs significantly when people didn't think that would happen.
Yeah, I think this week 17 can mean more than any week 17 we've ever seen because of the fact that the buys have changed. There's only one team now that can earn that coveted home field because now it's home field advantage and the only buy. So that number one seed.
Wait, there's only one buy now?
Before. Yeah. Because there's 7 playoff teams. Right. Yeah, so there's only one more. There's only one bye. There's one home field advantage spot, and that's the first seed. So teams, even if you're a shoe-in for the playoffs, you want that first seed because that's a huge advantage. Mm-hmm. So teams, even with 12, 13 wins, will still be going hard that last game unless they have that number one seed locked up because that means more than ever before. And we saw how much seeding matters with the Niners when they won and with the Pats when they lost.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Any final notes for you, Ryan, regarding schedule? I know we have covered a lot in probably the last hour.
It's the longest we've
45. Gone. Yeah.
I couldn't believe this is the longest we've gone. Like,
what can I say? I'm a delight to talk to. Okay. It flew by. I think the NFL has done us really well given everything that's been going on in the world at this point. Hopefully the season starts on time, and we just have an overall good 101st season of the NFL. I can't wait personally.
A new century of football.
Yeah.
Ready for us. And we have some new stars in the league who are the
Mhm.
headline this new century. Brady, Breeze, Rodgers are still in the league, but it's kind of shifting towards a new
Mahomes,
decade, new
Watson.
century of football. And yes, so those quarterbacks we've mentioned, the future of the league, looking forward to this 2020 season. And I feel like this is almost an advantage for football because usually right now we'd be talking about baseball would be in the midst of a season. NBA playoffs, even NHL playoffs are going on right now. Usually,
golf will be going on right now.
Yeah, golf, tennis around this time of year. There's a lot going on usually around this point, and football is not really the top of our minds, even though it is the most popular sport in America. But now that there's nothing going on, and football is pretty much the only thing making news right now, they're getting a lot of reputation, a lot of PR. Not that they needed it either. They're kind of like the Ravens and the Niners. Did they need more help? No, but they got it because they're just a powerhouse, and I don't see that changing for a while.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you all so much for watching Chips Podcast episode number 5. This is the 5th one we've done, Ryan, in this quarantine.
5th one in quarantine situation, yes.
So hopefully we bring many more. We got some big things planned, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Happy Mother's Day once again to all the moms watching, or I guess belated Mother's Day at this point. Ryan, so good talking to you. We'll see you next time, buddy.
See ya.